The signal came back at 03:17 a.m., stronger than before. Every dead satellite over the Atlantic powered on at the same second, syncing to a frequency we buried months ago. The same impossible pattern that started the blackout. The same pulse we swore never to answer again. I was alone in the control room when the whisper slipped through the static. Ethan. The waveform showed only noise, but it said my name again, clearer. We had traced the original signal to deep space, far beyond mapped debris fields. When we tried responding, 12 minutes of global chaos followed. Power grids failing, aircraft dropping off radar, 3 submarines vanishing without explanation. The project was shut down, the network dismantled. But now the system was rebuilding itself. Lines of code scrolled across my monitor, commands I wasn't typing. Dishes in Alaska and Nevada were reconnecting automatically, locking onto the same dark region between the stars. You left the door open, the voice whispered. Only 5 people knew my role in the first contact attempt. 2 were dead, 1 disappeared. That left me, and Director Shaw. The lights cut out. Red emergency glow flooded the room. The main screen shifted from data to sky, zooming toward a patch of darkness. Then I saw it. Not an object, an absence, a shape defined by what it erased. The temperature dropped, my breath fogged. The whisper multiplied into overlapping voices. We are closer. Atlantic tracking feeds flickered online. Hundreds of heat signatures hovered miles above the ocean, perfectly still. No engines, no radio. Just waiting. My secure phone vibrated, a message from Shaw. You answered it, didn't you? I stared at the growing darkness between the stars, and I understood something worse than invasion. The signal wasn't arriving. It was returning. The first object descended 9 minutes later. No fire, no sound. It simply lowered itself from the sky. Satellite tracking fractured as soon as it moved. Atomic clocks drifted out of sync. Coordinates shifted by fractions of a degree, then snapped back. Space felt unstable, like the map of reality was being redrawn in real time. I routed a telescope through the Nevada relay and forced a visual lock. The image refused to stay consistent. Sharp angles became curves. Edges folded inward. Each frame looked slightly different, as if the thing resisted observation. It wasn't metal. It wasn't light. It was distortion shaped like geometry. The whisper returned, layered now. We are not invasion, we are correction. A seismic alert cut across my screen. The object reached the Atlantic. There was no impact. The ocean beneath it flattened instantly, stretching into a flawless mirror that reflected the clouds above with impossible precision. Waves froze. Wind stalled at the boundary line as if afraid to cross. Civilian feeds began leaking into our system. Cargo ships stranded in motionless water, fishing vessels drifting on glass, helicopters hovering low because altimeters disagreed with gravity. Director Shaw's face appeared on my emergency monitor. What did you restart? I didn't, I said. It restarted itself. The facility vibrated, not from outside force, but from resonance. The servers were humming at the same frequency as the descending objects. The pattern we buried months ago was broadcasting outward again. We weren't receiving anymore. We were answering. Another object descended. Another mirrored circle formed beside the first, merging into a larger silent zone across the Atlantic. Storm systems approaching the boundary thinned and disappeared like erased brushstrokes. The main display flickered, and for a split second the incoming data translated into something human-readable. A grid, Earth outlined in shifting lines. Fault systems glowing beneath continents. The objects aligned precisely over tectonic stress zones running beneath the ocean floor. Structural imbalance detected, the chorus whispered. Probability collapse increasing. North America pulsed brighter on the grid. Fault lines illuminated. Appalachian ridges, San Andreas, Yellowstone. The Atlantic objects flashed once in perfect synchronization, and every earthquake sensor along the East Coast lit up red at exactly the same second. The first quake didn't feel like a quake. It felt like hesitation. Across the East Coast, buildings trembled, but not from a violent jolt. It was subtle, a low-frequency vibration rolling through the ground like something vast was testing the planet's balance. Seismic monitors spiked in perfect symmetry from Maine to Florida. Not a ripple, not a wave. A pulse. Yellowstone's caldera sensors lit up next, then the Appalachian Range, then microfractures along the San Andreas. Not sequential, simultaneous. Director Shaw disappeared from the screen as military override protocols flooded our systems. Access levels collapsed one by one. External command lines attempted to sever the network connections to Alaska and Nevada. It didn't work. The signal rerouted faster than we could block it. On the main display, the Earth grid visualization intensified. Fault lines glowed brighter, then dimmed, then brightened again, like veins adjusting to new pressure. Core oscillation variance detected, the chorus layered. Correction required. I pulled up geothermal data. The planet's core rotation, measured through neutrino drift, was stabilizing, not accelerating, not collapsing, stabilizing. The Atlantic mirror zones pulsed again. The glass-like water expanded outward another mile, swallowing waves whole. Ships inside the boundary were no longer drifting. They were locked in place, frozen. Air traffic control feeds showed aircraft autopilots compensating for microshifts in gravitational pull. Tiny deviations, less than 1%. But uniform. Gravity wasn't weakening. It was recalibrating. That's when the stars on the main screen shifted. Not because the camera moved, because the background did. The patch of darkness between constellations widened, and faint lines extended from it, thin strands of light connecting to each descending object over the Atlantic. They weren't independent. They were anchored. This planet was flagged, the voices whispered. Instability threshold exceeded. Flagged by who? The servers around me vibrated harder, harmonizing with a frequency too low to hear but strong enough to rattle glass. The blueprint of Earth refined itself, deeper layers unfolding, mantle convection currents, magnetic field fluctuations, atmospheric pressure variances. Every graph that had spiked red minutes ago was now sliding toward green, not chaos, adjustment. My secure phone buzzed again. A single emergency alert from the Pentagon. Global seismic intensity decreasing. I looked back at the frozen Atlantic. The objects hadn't come to destroy us. They had come to fix something, and the correction wasn't finished. The tremor stopped at 03:41 a.m., not gradually, instantly. Every seismic line on my monitor flattened into silence. Yellowstone's readings normalized. San Andreas returned to baseline stress. Even the Atlantic ridge stabilized as if pressure had been redistributed with surgical precision. The blueprint of Earth shifted from red to balanced amber. Correction phase 1 complete, the chorus whispered. Phase 1. The mirrored ocean began to ripple again. But the movement was unnatural. Waves returned in perfect symmetry, rolling outward from the distortion objects like synchronized breaths. Ships that had been frozen resumed motion mid-wake, as if the last 15 minutes had been edited. Civilian systems confirmed it. Power grids that flickered were now running smoother than before. Voltage fluctuations dropped globally, atmospheric pressure anomalies normalized. The planet felt tuned. Director Shaw's channel reconnected, voice tight. Seismic energy levels have decreased by 12% worldwide. That's impossible. Not impossible, I said quietly. Adjusted. The darkness between the stars expanded again on the main screen. Thin, luminous strands still tethered the Atlantic objects to that distant void. Then new coordinates flashed. Pacific Ring of Fire, Himalayan Belt, Antarctic ice shelf stress fractures. My stomach dropped. They weren't finished balancing. They were optimizing. Atmospheric instability remains. Magnetic drift variance persists. The voices layered calmly. Further correction recommended. Outside, satellites confirmed additional distortions forming high above the Pacific. Smaller, faster. The Atlantic objects pulsed once more, brighter than before. The glass water zones shrank as the distortions began rising slowly, returning toward orbit. Not retreating, repositioning. I pulled magnetic field data. Earth's magnetosphere, unstable for decades, was tightening. Solar wind interference decreased by measurable margins. Radiation exposure levels dipped globally. They were reinforcing the shield. Shaw's voice dropped to a whisper. Ethan, if they can stabilize tectonics and magnetics, they can control the planet, I finished. A new line appeared across my screen. Autonomous correction authority required for long-term survival probability. Authority. They weren't asking anymore. The signal strengthened, and for the first time the voices synchronized into a single tone. Consent accelerates stability. My access terminal unlocked. A single prompt blinked in red. Grant planetary correction access, yes, no. My hand hovered above the keyboard as the darkness between the stars continued to widen. Because if they could fix Earth, they could reshape it. My hand hovered over the keyboard. Yes. No. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Outside, global feeds poured in. Reduced seismic strain, stabilized grids, smoother satellite orbits. Storm systems that had threatened landfall were weakening over open water. Radiation levels in polar flight paths were dropping measurably. They weren't lying. They were helping. Consent accelerates stability, the unified voice repeated. Calm, patient. Director Shaw broke in over the secure line. Do not authorize. We don't know the long-term cost. I stared at the widening darkness between the stars, at the thin strands anchoring the distortion objects in orbit. What's the alternative? I asked. A new data column unfolded across my screen, without intervention, increasing tectonic volatility within 30 years. Core oscillation drift within 50. Magnetosphere weakening beyond safe thresholds before the century's end. Extinction probabilities rising in clean clinical percentages. With intervention, stability achieved, the voice continued. Atmospheric recalibration, seismic redistribution, magnetic reinforcement, survival probability maximized. Maximized, not guaranteed. Optimized. The Atlantic distortions were nearly back in high orbit now. Smaller distortions were forming above the Pacific Rim, aligning over volatile zones like surgeons' positioning tools. The planet felt still but waiting. Shaw's voice trembled for the first time in my life. Ethan. Once you give them authority, we may never get it back. Another line of text appeared. Human governance retains surface autonomy. Core systems require external calibration. Surface autonomy. They were separating humanity from the foundation of its own world. The building lights flickered again. Not failure, but resonance. The same harmonic vibration hummed through the floor, through my bones. I thought about the blackout months ago, the chaos, the fear. Then I looked at the live data. Everything was stabilizing. The cursor blinked. If I pressed no, they might leave. If I pressed yes, Earth would no longer belong solely to us. The voice softened, almost human. We did not choose your world signaled collapse, we respond. My phone vibrated again. A new global alert. Volcanic pressure levels in Yellowstone reduced by 8% in the last 3 minutes. They were already acting, waiting only for permanence. The darkness between the stars pulsed once. I exhaled slowly and moved my hand closer to the keyboard. My finger touched the key. For a moment, nothing else existed. Not the control room, not Shaw breathing sharply through the secure line, not the widening absence between the stars. Just yes. If you do this, Shaw said quietly. We hand them the core of our world. I watched the live feeds one last time. Seismic activity stabilizing across fault lines. Magnetosphere strength climbing by measurable margins. Storm systems dissolving before landfall. They weren't forcing us. They were proving capability. The unified voice spoke again, steady and singular. Autonomy of surface civilization preserved. Core systems require calibration beyond human capacity. Delay increases extinction probability. Extinction probability. Cold words, clean math. Another alert flashed. Antarctic ice shelf fractures slowing. Pacific pressure zones equalizing. Power grids reporting the lowest fluctuation variance in recorded history. They were already tuning the planet like an instrument. The darkness between the stars pulsed brighter, and for the first time I saw depth within it. Structures, motion, a vast network extending far beyond a single system. This wasn't first contact. This was maintenance. I realized something then. The blackout months ago hadn't been a warning. It had been a diagnostic. Shaw whispered. Ethan? The cursor blinked again. If I pressed no, maybe they would withdraw. Maybe Earth would continue its slow drift toward instability. Decades of worsening disasters, systems failing one by one. If I pressed yes, we survive. But never alone. The voice softened, almost gentle. Consent accelerates stability. Refusal preserves isolation. Isolation. That word echoed louder than extinction. Humanity had always believed the universe was silent. But it wasn't silent. It was watching, waiting. My hand stopped shaking. I pressed. The screen flashed white. Every monitor in the room filled with light as the harmonic vibrations surged through the facility, through the ground, through the air itself. Outside, the Atlantic distortions synchronized one final time. Then they dissolved into strands of light that shot upward, reconnecting with the darkness between the stars. The prompt vanished. New text appeared. Planetary core access granted, calibration initiated. All seismic lines flattened. Magnetic field strength increased another fraction. Atmospheric instability metrics dropped to historic lows. For the first time in hours, the building was silent. The darkness between the stars began to close, not retreating, connected. Director Shaw's voice returned, barely audible. What did you choose? I looked at the steady data, at a planet quieter than it had been in centuries. And somewhere deep beneath our feet, something vast had just taken hold. They're not invading, I said. They're staying.